Alright, this morning we're going to begin a series about Introduction to GitHub for .NET, TSQL, and Powershell. And this is kind of based on speaking with an individual the other day who works with hundreds of .NET developers. And he likes to ask them, oh, okay, what kind of source control do you use? And asks them, do you use GitHub? And he was stunned to find that most of the .NET developers, TSQL developers, PowerShell developers had never heard of GitHub. And so if you're one of those type of developers and you have heard of GitHub and you don't like it and you have all these reasons why not, this video is not for you. This video is for people who haven't heard of it or may have heard of it before but don't know how to use it. And I'm not going to get super in-depth in detail because there are tons of people who've covered GitHub. A lot of them are covering GitHub for Ruby and Python and others. But I'm going to get into kind of the basics using both the web UI and the Windows UI. So today we're going to introduce just the web UI, about how to do some of the basic things like, adding a folder, adding a file, adding a repository, and then looking at previous code changes and then commenting on code changes. So we're not going to get into all the statistics and details. We're just going to get into some of the basics today, and over this next week we're going to cover more of it. But it is a good idea in general to be familiar with some type of source control, just because that's kind of where things are heading in that direction. So whether it's GitHub or TFS or whatnot, this is just something to be familiar with. And GitHub is used by a lot in the open source. Though after talking to him, and it kind of explained why, because I was like, there isn't a lot of SQL Server scripts on GitHub. And he was like, well, they just hadn't, a lot of the people he talked to said just hadn't heard of it before. So that kind of explains a lot. Now, if you want to get GitHub for Windows, you can go to windows.github.com, and you can download GitHub for Windows Vista 7 and 8, and it will actually provide you with a GUI. And we're not going to discuss that today, but I do want to let you know that that does actually allow you to get this pretty simple a GUI, an interface. And I know a lot of people in Windows especially, they can see command line programming that we use a lot in Linux, and so that can be a little intimidating, even though with PowerShell it makes it a lot easier. But this will provide you with a GUI to where you can use the GUI instead of doing everything command line, and it's very simple to use. But today we're going to learn how to do the web-based GitHub, just because some people actually don't even know that you can do this, which really simplifies processes. So the first thing we want to do is create a repository. I'm not going to actually create the repository, but I'm going to go through the steps. So if you sign up for GitHub, and you should have no repositories, but you can create a new repository by clicking New. I also believe if you go to Account Settings and you go to Repositories, I guess you can't create a new one from there. But I think when I first signed up, there was a way in the settings to do that. However, if not, go to your repositories, click on New, then it will bring up, here's the owner and then the repository name. You'll provide a description, and then you can initialize it with a README, and we'll get just briefly into a README. It's just a file that explains the repository. Okay, so I'm not going to create a new one, but let's go to SQL Server, just as a case in point, since we use that all the time. And as a case in point with the README, it's readme.md. You can click on that, and you can see this is the README, and it also comes up in the description. So this right here pops up when you look at the repository. So let's go to that README for a second. And if we click on Edit, we can actually edit this this README. Okay. All right. Now, another thing that people may be asking, this is a big one, probably one of the most simple ones, is how do we add a file? Okay. Now, I'm not going to actually add the file, but this is how you would go about doing that. Okay. So we have a repository. Let's suppose it's SQL Server, and we want to add a new file called new file. So we're going to add a new file called new file SQL. We're going to say create table, new table, and then we're going to do ID, int, and we're going to do name, and we're going to say varchar 100, and we would create our table, and then we'd say okay for our new file. I'm going to create new table. We're just describing it. And if I wanted to add this file, I would click on commit new file. Of course I don't, but that's what I would do if I wanted to. If I want to add a folder to SQL Server, and this is using the web GUI, there are other ways obviously in the actual desktop GUI, but this is just a web. what I can do is I can say new folder and then slash, and a new folder will be created, or a new folder named new folder will be created. Okay. I can also backspace and delete that and just do new, and it'll pop up. Okay, in this case I'm going to cancel, leave this page. Okay, so that's how to add a file, that's how to add a folder, or add a file under a folder. In fact, if you look, this was my mistake here. I had admin tools and I couldn't remember. I was adding a file and I was like, wait, what was the folder name? And so I did, I think it's admin dash tools, and that's what happened here. Because you'll see there's only one thing here, and there's a lot of things here. So that was my bad. But it's kind of funny. Okay, now if we go to an actual file, and in this case I'm going to use this. So under SQL Server ETL, one of my favorite things to use is bulk insert. A lot of people don't know it's a really useful ETL tool. People always think that you can only bulk insert like CSV and text files, but actually you can bulk insert quite a bit. I mean, all kinds of dot files, as long as they're delimited. So let's look at this for instance. So we have this file. Suppose, and you can see why organizations would find this especially valuable. Suppose we want to look at all the changes to this file. So we have this file, but have there been any changes to this file? We can click on history, and we can see that bulk insert, first of all, hopefully y'all can see this. Let's scroll up here. I think y'all should be able to see this. Okay, you can see bulk insert help, that was added on August 28th. You can right click, click and then control. And this is what was added. Okay, 12 additions, 0 deletions. Now, let's look at this next. I'm going to try to find a deletion just to show. Okay, so we added more lines. Note if one column exists in the file, this can be removed. Okay, update. Let's see if... Okay, here we go. So there was one addition and there was one deletion. We did from file.txt. I deleted that and I added from C file.txt. Okay. Now, suppose we wanted to comment on that, because again, if you have an organization and you're updating code and other people are updating code, suppose you have a question, you're like, why was this done? I can say, why was this done? I don't understand why we needed to add the C drive. And this is just an example. I can then commit on this line. Comment on this line. Okay? And again, I'm not going to actually do that. Okay. Alright. So that's how we can comment on a line of code. That's how we can view changes to a line. You can also see recent changes that were done, and we can select a period of 1 day, 3 days, 1 week, 1 month. So suppose, again, you were on vacation for a month. You could click on 1 month and you could see, okay, these are all the changes to the repository. So if you're working at a company and you're sharing all that code, again, you would want to look at the changes made, especially if you were gone for more than a week or two. Of course, if you were only gone for a day, you can look at a day and you can see the changes. And that way you can stay up to date with what's going on. Okay. So, as an individual, how should you use GitHub? And this is just a suggestion, but you can use it for projects. I like to use it for references. I don't actually use it for projects. A lot of my projects, I'd say about 90% of them are private. Some of my projects I may like lighter projects, easy projects, but most of my my upper level projects are private. But you can use it for like making a note of things, or maybe even kind of what like Ola Hollengren, the useful scripts that he provides. You can also use it to store like maybe administrator scripts or just things to make a reference to. Different people store it for different things. There are some people who put their entire projects on there. There are some people who will update organizations. Just as a general rule, because comments are allowed, the first time I had ever heard of GitHub, I went to a meeting here in Austin, and it was, I believe, if I recall, it was a WordPress meeting, and they were talking about GitHub, and there was people who posted up PHP, and the speaker, and I would love to say who his name was because I'd give him credit, he had an excellent talk about using people skills when posting code and commenting on code. And he was highlighting an example where someone called another person an idiot in a much meaner tone. And his point was like, this is not very good for the open source community. It kind of makes programmers seem like elitist snobs. To be fair, some of them are. But the idea is that he was trying to advise people to kind of avoid that, which is really useful. But I will caution you, if you post public code, and I can see why some people would rather just post code on their website for this reason, you may find that you get comments that are incredibly nasty, and that's just part of it. Generally speaking, what I found, I used to work in sales when I was in college at a bank, is that people who are negative are much more likely to be vocal than people who are positive. So as a case in point, like with gratefulness or gratitude, you're more likely to actually get negative remarks than you are to get positive remarks. If you've made a positive change in people's life, I found this out financially at least, people are much less likely to say thank you, whereas if they don't even like one tiny little thing, they're more likely to squeal. So it's just something that understand. I wouldn't take it personal, and you can even like choose not to pay attention to your comments. I don't know if they allow you to block it, because luckily I've stayed, since the .NET community, like he was saying, a lot of them don't know about the GitHub. Maybe that's the reason why they've stayed off so far. But it would be cool to see more TSQL on there. There aren't a lot of SQL Server repositories. And so you can upload files, and I've seen people upload images, I've seen people upload books, I've seen people upload CSV files, delimited files, as well as a lot of code. You'll also notice too, even though GitHub doesn't recognize SQL Server, it will tell you the language statistics. Like I said, it doesn't recognize SQL Server, so it thinks this is 90% C# and PowerShell and 10% PowerShell. There's actually a lot of TSQL. So, but anyway, that's kind of just a brief introduction. We're going to be covering more later this week. The next video, we're going to cover the actual desktop UI, how to use it for some of the same things we covered in this video, and then we'll go over some of a little bit more, how to like fork, how to get the zip files, and all that other good stuff.